is that Joe on the pregame show, they were in the studio, said that when he was contemplating retirement, he called Buckner because he's like, basically beside Buckner and Frank Gore, he's like, those were the two best leaders / teammates I had. I was going to tell Buckner what my plan was to kind of pass the baton. Like, this is your team, bro, kind of deal. He calls Buckner and was like, man, I think I'm done. I'm going to retire. And this was right around free agency. And Buckner's like, well, I got bad news for you. It's not official yet, but I'm not going to be on this team. It'll come out in the next week. And Joe said, he's like, even though in my mind I'd already kind of retired in my head, I went back into player mode where I was like, what? He's like, I was devastated. He was shell-shocked. And one of the things that Buckner said, I don't blame him because you're just in the world. They were going to meet in the middle and he had family to feed. It's like, DeForest, you were the 7th pick of the draft. Like, you're a multimillionaire. But, like, I'm not going to nitpick when you're a high-character guy on that comment.
He's a high-character, yeah.
Even though it's a little out of touch. But, it was a bold move. And it backfired in the sense of Dante Whitner. Then the question gets passed to Dante Whitner, and he called Javon Kinlaw bust. And to me, a bust is a guy that can't play. But, I do think it incorporates injured guys. And let's face it, right now, Javon Kinlaw is a walking, just massive injury red flag. I mean, they had a bye week and his knee injury, which is not... It's one thing, it's like, he broke his ankle or he's coming back from a torn labrum. This guy has a Todd Gurley type thing going on where it's not like, some games he can play, some games he can't. And it's like, we don't know. And in most practices, he's not going to be available. So it's kind of it's a nothing. At least when you missed on Pettis, you're like, this guy can't play. Like, to me, Ayuk is nowhere near a bust yet. Yeah, I mean, exactly. He's playing for someone. So this is... Like, you made a move and you drafted kind of for need, even though, I mean, you see Kinlaw, he was going in the top 20. But I did, and it's easy for teams to say that aren't going to take him to go, like, he had some physical red flags, and it's been a disaster.
I will say, I don't, obviously it's a big deal. The Kinlaw thing's a big deal. And I agree with you. I don't want to call the player a bust, but at this point, the pick is a bust because it's not that they need him to be, DeForest Buckner. They just need him to play. The one thing that might save him is they actually do, I would say this, organizationally, they do a really good job identifying defensive linemen, right? And getting, I don't watch them today going, I don't even think Kinlaw's absence was their problem. Like, even if you forget about, did they need Buckner in this game or this season? I don't even think, Kinlaw's when he's missing can be a big deal.
But it is about impact players, guy. And you saw today, Jonathan Taylor, Darius Leonard, Michael Pittman, the guys you draft high, they're good.
I guess my point is I'm not hung up on Buckner anymore. I'm not hung up on Buckner and they could have paid him. Everyone else could have paid him. I'm not hung up on Buckner. It's about Kinlaw and Ayuk. Yeah. I'm with you. I'm just saying, I think a lot of people got hung up on Buckner this week. I'm not hung up on Buckner.
No.
But it's about where are your premium playmakers? And, at a time when your roster's expensive, you need the guys that you drafted to produce. They have got to figure out the Ayuk thing because I don't think the Kinlaw thing is getting figured out. I think he's got a knee problem that it's just going to be a knee problem. And he's just not going to be reliable for that reason, unfortunately.
I do think I'm going to go one thing on Buckner, though. I said this forever about Belichick because everyone's like, when Khalil Mack got traded, Belichick would have done the same thing. I'm like, check his history of all the guys he traded that were also sweet, right? Richard Seymour, Logan Mankins at the end. Those two guys were just premium players, right? Leaders, elite guys. He gave them second contracts, both of them. Gronkowski, obviously, a second contract guy. To not give, one of the things that was crazy with Khalil Mack, it was he was a no-brainer second contract guy. Buckner was a no-brainer for any team in the league, second contract guy. Even the Niners, I think, would admit, he was a second contract level guy. We just traded him based on the value. You could argue they got a little cute with it, and it backfired.
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
I think because they did play kind of fantasy GM. Because I remember applauding it. I'm like, fuck, you got the 13th pick for Buckner? You drafted him 7th, and then 4 years later when you had to pay him, you got the 13th. I'm like, that's incredible. Daryl Morey and Billy Bean would have been like, sweet value. On paper, it's sweet. And then they traded one spot back, and then they came up to get Ayuk, and it was all sweet. On paper, it was like, damn, you got like multiple players, and you re-signed all these guys. And now it's like Buckner's just sweet, and you got all these question marks.
Yeah.
That's the problem. So I think it's a little bit like, trading. They just made a trade on, professors talk about this a lot. Like I'm not a big, in theory, everything looks good on a whiteboard. But in reality, it's just not that strong right now. And I'm with you. Ayuk is more important, but Ayuk is still a major question mark, whatever the fuck is going on.
And I'm not even saying Ayuk's more important, even though I think you're right. I'm just saying he's the one I think is more, that situation is more fixable. I think there's just a physical nature to Kinlaw's situation that nobody has any control over. Act of God, as they say in the fine print.
If he has a Todd Gurley knee, then there you got major issues.
That's where you don't get the warranty voids when you have an act of God. It's like, hey, sorry, nothing anybody can do about it. And you know what it's kind of like? It's kind of like their offense right now. That trade is kind of like the Niners offense. It requires 6 different things to go right. It's like hitting a parlay. That trade is like hitting a parlay. It's like, hey, man, if these 3 things go right, man, it's going to be big. It's like, yeah, but it's a parlay. So like 3 things have to go right, right? There's just a lot going on.
I bet the guys at MGM would be like, yeah, most 3-team parlays hit about 5% of the time, right?
and it's like the Niners offense. When you can't push the ball down the field, you need 7 to 11 plays in a row to like work. It was like all of a sudden nothing's working for the Colts. Bam, let's just hit a 57-yarder. And that's
this is where you got
multiplayer trades and picks and all that stuff. It's
this is where I applauded it, because the college scout in me like loves the draft, loves having the picks. It's no different than like, hey, I got Mookie Betts. You can take Mookie Betts, and I'm not saying Buckner was not Mookie Betts. I mean, Buckner was at the time like he had not made a Pro Bowl, but it was clear like he was a Pro Bowl level player. But you were basically trading him. It happens a lot in baseball. Like, I'm going to trade a sweet guy, especially if you're a team that can afford it, for like 4 or 5 prospects. And we've seen, if you've followed baseball and you're listening to this forever, most of the time, like if you hit on one of those prospects, it's an awesome trade, right? If you just hit on one of the prospects and the second guy is like just becomes like a third guy in your rotation, you're like doing cartwheels. But it's risky. We have seen so many historically in baseball, right, where I give you player X who's a star for 4 or 5 prospects and they never hit. Billy was always good. He whiffed on a couple, but he could always turn a couple of those prospects into others. He'd always be able to chase it. In football, you can't. Like once you use those picks on the players, and the Niners had to use them that night, it was like they got Kinlaw and they got Ayuk. And I think the thing with Kinlaw though, Guy, is, and I'm with you, it is what it is. I think what's such a killer is that if you're Kyle, if you're John, like you went to the pro day, you see this guy, you go, well, God, it's fucking this guy. Just at minimum, you don't need to be around the NFL for that long to walk by a guy like Javon Kinlaw and go, holy shit, that's what an NFL fucking player looks like, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you can get consumed with that and overthink, well, it's like you already had a guy who was a badass. And they kind of talked about it tonight. Like, they do just kind of, and listen to Staley, like, do they miss him a little bit? Like, now shit's hitting the fan. Like, they don't have Richard there. They don't have him there. Like, I don't know. I've never met Trent Williams, but it doesn't, he feels a little quieter. McGlinchey's not good enough. I think if McGlinchey was as good as Trent Williams, I think McGlinchey would be that guy. But he's not. So he has no room to talk. Their quarterback in most places is that guy. Well, their quarterback's not good. Fred kind of can be that guy, but like, what's he going to do? Scream at the offense? Like, you do kind of need guys on both sides.
But I don't know. It's
a little more difficult for a wide receiver. I don't know his personality.
When you play like him,
yeah.
Like, I agree with you. It's difficult for a wide receiver who.
But
plays
if that's not his temperament, though,
no, it's true. Well, I think back to Kyle Juszczyk when he was on the podcast with us a few months ago, and we asked him about Ayuk several months ago, I guess. But we asked him about Ayuk, and he was telling us how much he likes Ayuk. They were both hurt around the same time, and they lockered next to each other. And Brandon wants to be great. And one of the things he said was, Ayuk would really benefit from having a veteran receiver around. The way Deebo Samuel got to learn from Emmanuel Sanders, that is what Brandon needs. And maybe Deebo's not older enough than Brandon Ayuk to be that guy for Brandon Ayuk, maybe Sanu's not good enough right now. Like Emmanuel Sanders was a guy that came in and was viewed as a missing piece for the 49ers, and it turned out to be a major piece. I don't know. Maybe Kyle was just talking, but
I think you either have it or you don't, guy. And when I say like have it, I mean there are like the super high level leaders. Most teams are lucky to have one or two, right? And Buckner,
the J.J. Watts.
Yeah, Larry Fitzgerald was that guy forever. Uh, but Buckner was just that guy. I mean, he just was. I mean, you and I were around the team enough to see like, and just knowing him from Oregon, like his character. I mean, I don't think he did. Was it Calais Campbell last year? Like, if he wins Man of the Year or something one time in the NFL, like he's that level of a guy. And anytime you make that move, it just goes back to I hear you. It's over, but it just is one of those point in time where I think they would if they could redo it. There's no fucking way they would make that trade. And it's just hard because they desperately, like, you just don't fill that void. And they can't. Because I would say Buckner, probably even more than Warner, like Buckner getting someone's ass if he had to on offense. He had that much juice. Because Staley had that much juice to talk to anyone on the team. And I just, to me, it reflects their team like there's no leadership. And there's something in football where when your coach, like obviously every coach, in theory, every head coach, any good one worth their salt, has guys respect. But they will all tell you, and you've been in a million of these meetings, like you do need some players to take some responsibility. And even one thing Greg said, like, and he is right when we were kind of arguing with him about IU, because like there is some responsibility on players to work hard. Like this is the pros, this is not USC or Fresno State where you can really just kind of hold their hand. Like it gets to the point where it's like you're either doing it or you're not after a while. And that's where you need the players,
especially when
really
you
kind of
are
run
on the
locker room.
field, right? Like when you're doghouse, you're still on the field. Like that means you have chances to make plays.
The Niners just lack it. And that's the one thing, like watching, for example, like the Raiders don't lack that. I mean, you watch them today, you kind of feel like, and again, one of their best players, their starting quarterback. That to me, guy, when your best player in football is your quarterback, or I mean, definitely one of them. I mean, you could probably nitpick some teams. Like when Lamar talks, everyone's going to listen, right? When Josh Allen's going to talk, people are going to listen. Obviously, Tom and the older guys, Drew Brees, and I mean the established guys. But you just watch Rodgers. Like Rodgers needs to talk to a defensive back, even if it's just like, "Hey, man, you're doing a hell of a job." I think sometimes we think it's just negative stuff. I watched Rodgers' press conference today, mainly because I was bored. I mean, football wasn't really doing much for me before the Sunday night game, even though I enjoyed the Raider game, but it just became a blowout. He does a really good job right now of like talking about defensive players and bringing them up. Like, I think he understands. Like, I think he's kind of come to grips with what's at stake being in his role. And who's that guy for the 49ers? Where Derek is really good at that, obviously with just offense, but just talking about the guys on his team. Like, it's important if you're like a second-year defensive back and you're just a rotational guy. You're like, God, the quarterback was talking about me in the press conference? Like, that does mean stuff to people.
Most players that play the sport don't get their name mentioned.
They don't get to talk.
Well, forget about getting to talk. They don't get their name mentioned. Like, there are guys that play 40 snaps in a game for the last 7 years that 90% of us haven't heard of. Like, oh, that guy was in the – what's his name? He's in the league? Oh, yeah, dude. He's like the third safety. He plays special teams. He's been doing it for 6 years. Their name doesn't get mentioned the whole game. The whole game. They exist. And I don't think – and this doesn't really matter, I guess. I don't even know if that's Garoppolo's personality, even if he was –
I don't think it is
that guy, Yeah, I do think it goes back to their primary problem is their quarterback play. That is their number one problem. And everything trickles down from that. Yeah. I think quarterback play makes stuff that we just start when your quarterback play is not good, there is just a million things to nitpick. When your quarterback play is pretty good, things fall into place because games are filled with mistakes by the winning team. Games are filled with them. Look, the Colts made a bunch of them. Most games are not this weekend in the NFL where there was like a close game. Literally, there was one game in the NFL this weekend, I'm pretty sure, that was a single-digit score game. And it was actually the Thursday night game was one, and then the Falcons-Dolphins was a 2-point game. That's it, John. The rest of them were 10 points or more.
25-3, 41-17, 28-19. That game wasn't even that close. 33-22, Eagles-Raiders. That game definitely wasn't that close. The Eagles.
It was.
Yeah. Eagles got to lead the league in fourth quarter touchdowns that mean nothing. Arians, I was listening to Coward had on Arians on his podcast this week. He was good. And Colin asked him something about Brady and like what he's brought to the table in terms of leadership. And Arians kind of laughed and he said, the one thing is like, I can go to a young wide receiver and say, hey man, on the field, like you got to break that route breaks at 12, not at 10. You need to come in sharper downhill and not round it off, whatever the coaching point is. And he's like, the guy will just next route do the same thing he just did. Won't even listen. He said, Tom goes over to him, says it. That guy is perfect all week. And he's like, it's powerful, right? And he's had guys like that on his team forever, but every coach having those guys around, like it's like a parent, right? If your brother or your siblings, like you're in trouble, like you can have conversations with them about ways to like interact with your parents as they're just screaming at you. And coaching is no different. And I think when you watch the Bucs, Tom Brady, whatever the way we revered the guy and the way we thought of him, what he's brought to that team, like I don't think the hyperbole on him is like
he was underappreciated.
It's overhyped. I believe he was, and I think everyone there to a man will just be like, and all the guys in New England for 2 decades told you, right? They're like, I'm telling you, this fucking guy is just. He is the man. Tom is the greatest teammate. Every single guy to a man. Defense, offense, black guy, white guy, young guy, old guy. It never mattered. They all uttered the same words. We're like, Belichick, Brady, is Tom overrated, dink and dunk? It's just, Jesus. I mean, that's another one. I'm not going to play revisionist history again because we brought that up a couple weeks ago. But Jesus.
I mean, we've done that topic 37 times. They underrated him. We underrated him. They underrated him.
They've clearly just underrated or overrated or just not properly rated the leadership stuff. And it is back to the Raider stuff. Like Derek does have respect of guys. And I don't know if they're when the guy that impacts the game the most, and like you said, the quarterback play, when your quarterback plays shitty, it's your leadership can get out of whack. Right?
See, I think
defensive guys start complaining.
I think they properly rate like really solid leader type dudes. It just might be that maybe with Garoppolo they missed it.
Who's the? I mean, I guess Kittle is, but he's.
I just think they. I think they like.
I'm not saying they don't have good high level leaders. I'm just saying it's clearly out of whack on this team.
It is. But I think they value it. Like they value guys like Debo and Juszczyk and Trent Williams and Fred Warner and George Kittle. Like they do because they talk about it all the time.
I meant though the hierarchy on their squad of how it was working. Because I think I would say a large percentage of NFL teams value that stuff though, right? Like wouldn't the New York Giants want all those guys, or the Minnesota Vikings want all these guys?
But it matters when you're good enough. Then it helps you. Like Tom's leadership's amazing because he's the greatest quarterback of all time. It means more coming from Tom Brady and all the things he does to be the greatest quarterback of all time.
And their team is
because he's not accidentally the greatest quarterback of all time.
One thing I will say, like I'm not trying to act like he's taking some 3-win team and making them into a 14. Like they are good, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that team is. I saw one highlight today of like Mike Evans running over a guy in the goal line. It's like Jesus, this guy. Who are these guys? Vita Vea dominating, JPP with one hand chasing guys down. It's like they're really talented.
And their coach is good.
Well, I think their coach.
And they've drafted well.
One thing Arians mentioned as well is like he's like, I did return my entire staff. The guy was lucky. Like every guy, we won the Super Bowl and every guy came back. Like the Niners did not. Right? Sometimes, you just get a little lucky with the next guy to come up. Sometimes you just lose a guy that you can't properly replace. Sometimes you get rid of your $100 million coach and you look better.
Yeah, I mean, look, but the Niners did have staff continuity for 4 years.
Yeah, and they were really
right.
Good
like it's not like if you coach for 5 or 6 or 7 years with one franchise, and you don't lose a coordinator till after Something's 4 weird. Years, then that was a pretty good run of staff continuity. Like Sean McVay's on his 3rd defensive coordinator, right? 4 years is staff continuity. Because if you're having success, someone's going to take your offensive coordinator or your defensive coordinator. You can block some other stuff like he did. But the Niners had staff continuity. Like you and I both watch a lot of Oregon State football, Jonathan Smith. It's been 4 years. They've gone from the worst defense in college football. They were like 129. They're giving up 48 points a game. Now they're in like the 50 range in terms of ranking from 129th.
Same coordinator?
Same staff, same offensive coordinator, same defensive coordinator. A lot of the same staff for 4 years. And they talk about it all the time. Staff continuity matters. Well, I mean, you're right. That is something. But I'm just saying, it's not like the Niners, they've had staff continuity. And unfortunately, now they went to the Super Bowl, so they didn't totally get wasted. But now here they are, and they're breaking in a new DC and whatever has changed offensively. This is why we talk about taking advantage of quarterbacks on rookie contracts, because eventually that door closes and then it gets really hard because now more guys are getting paid. Your quarterback's getting paid. If you took advantage of a young rookie quarterback on a young quarterback on a rookie contract and you went to the Super Bowl or you won a division a couple of times, coaches get hired and it just gets harder. It just gets harder to stay at the top of the mountain.
Yeah, and taking advantage of a rookie contract at a quarterback, a first-round rookie, does not mean winning the Super Bowl. I don't think success, like what the Bills did with Josh Allen's rookie contract, was a success. What the Ravens have done, success, right? Like that to me, if the Niners do with Trey Lance what those two teams did, right, win some playoff games. I know the Bills got to the championship game. The Ravens last year just won their first playoff game under Lamar. He hasn't even signed his extension yet. It might not happen till the end. But this year, right? If they were in the AFC Championship game, and I don't even know who in the AFC, the Bills beat them, right? It'd be like that. The Lamar thing is a success. So you just have to be good. People are just asking you to be the Ravens or the Bills, right? I don't need to guarantee Super Bowl bursts. Just be in the dance. That's what people want. Just be in the dance. And I think right now, what's the scary part about Kyle is McVay's I'm in the dance guy if I got Sean McVay. Just a fact. His team, they won again today. They're 5-1 or 6-1. Here's what I know the Rams are going to be. Minimum 11 wins. And I would say right now, if I would do over under 11-5 Rams, I'm going over. So that's 5 years with McVay. His worst year is 9. And hell, we'll see Arizona plays Thursday night. The Rams, I know they lost Arizona, but by no means is this division over, right? Especially 17 games. We got a long way to go. They easily could be division champs. They might be the 1 seed. They already beat Tampa. Who knows? We got a long way to go. Sean McVay, 5 years, 4 playoffs, potentially another division. And his shittiest year was 9-7. Where Kyle's shitty years now, I saw some people in the chat, 2 more wins max this year. I don't know. But if I had to do over-under right now, 8.5 on this team,
yeah, I don't think he's going to be
under.
I don't think it's going to be a 6-win season. But to your point, John Harbaugh won a Super Bowl. But John Harbaugh is not living off that decade-old Super Bowl. John Harbaugh, because
now he's kicking ass again.
Yeah, but but his bad year, he had a 5-11 year. Other than that, his bad years are 9-7, 8-8.
You remember that 5-11 year? They had they had this crazy stretch. I vividly remember of 7 straight games they lost by under 4 points. Remember, and they were having these crazy moments. It was
was that the year they had that play at midfield on the kick?
They had the craziest shit happen to them ever. Even Flacco was their quarterback, but it was. I just remember statistically, it was a weird year, and that did lead to Ronnie Stanley, who actually I think just went back. It
led to Ronnie Stanley. Well, you're right. A bad year, John, leads to a good first round pick at least.
Yeah.